Let's talk about Hui. Hui is by most metrics a typical immobile burst mage with utility, nothing we haven't seen before, except for the part where he has 10 unique abilities at his disposal. High APM players rejoice, we now have a mage who asks you to make finger spaghetti and brain casserole in order to choose and cast a basic combo, and I couldn't be more excited. As usual, I got together with my community to test Hui, learning everything we could about him pre-release. In this video, we'll be exploring his many basic abilities, ability usage principles, combos, skill point distribution, purpose and playstyle, combat approach, draft, itemization, and runes. Hui's passive is an AoE explosion that triggers when a champion is hit by 2 damaging spells. Your first unique spell marks the champion, your second within 4 seconds triggers the damage after a short delay, aimed on the ground at their location. The explosion cannot proc itself onto a marked secondary target. There is no per champion cooldown on this effect, but you cannot mark a champion again until the explosion has resolved. Instead of the usual 3 basic abilities, Hui has 9. Your first keystroke, Q, W, or E, enters a mood, which grants access to a new set of 3 spells. Your second keystroke casts one of those spells and exits your mood. All of your spells within a mood share a mana cost and a cooldown, so if you cast QQ, then QW and QE are also on cooldown. While in a mood, you can also press R to exit the mood for free. Fortunately, most of Hui's spells are very straightforward, so understanding the basics isn't the hard part of this champion. Hui's Q grants access to his damaging spells. QQ is a linear skill shot that deals damage in a small area on impact or at max range. The spell deals some flat magic damage and some % max health damage. This is Hui's bread and butter direct combat tool. Hui's QW is a long-ranged area-targeted skill shot that deals damage after a delay. Against isolated or immobilized targets, it deals more damage based on the target's missing HP. While this deals less damage than QQ when its conditions aren't met, it's still a decent poke tool, it's a very strong combo tool, and it's a great finisher. Hui's QE is a slow linear area skill shot that slows enemies and damages them over time. This spell deals damage in 2 parts. First, a series of shockwaves dealing upfront magic damage. Each target can only be hit by 1 shockwave per cast. Second, a pool of lava fissures, which deal damage over time and apply a slow. Both of these effects end immediately when an enemy exits the fissure. This Q is your primary zone control, your wave clear, and your core AoE damage in teamfights. Against a single target, QE will only outdamage the others when you have high AP and when the enemy is hit for the entire duration. Hui's W grants access to his utility spells. WQ creates a linear zone that grants him and allied champions bonus movement speed in any direction for as long as they are within the area. This is a tool for macro, setup, escape, and engage support. Hui's WW creates an area around the target location which grants himself and allied champions a shield. Half of the shield is applied immediately and the other half ramps over time, but the shield drops soon after leaving the area. This tool is great for standing your ground in a teamfight and for defending against divers, but the shield is only half as effective on allies as it is on Hui himself. Hui's WE empowers his next 3 autos or ability hits to deal bonus magic damage and to restore his mana. If he lands all 3, he will gain more mana than he spent on W. Only 1 charge can be spent per ability, but if an AoE spell strikes multiple targets at the same time, then it will deal WE damage to each. Hui's passive doesn't count WE as a spell unless it's applied by an auto attack. This is the only source of damage from W and the most frequently cast W spell. Hui's E grants access to his CC spells, all of which deal the exact same damage. EQ is a linear skill shot that damages and applies fear to the first target hit. It is his simplest bread and butter catch tool. Hui's EW creates an area at the target location, which grants vision of the area and threatens CC against the first champion to enter. On cast, Hui fires an eye at the ground. When the eye arrives at its location, it will lock onto the nearest visible enemy champion, firing at their location and colliding with the first enemy hit. It is blockable by minions. On hit, the eye deals damage and roots the target. This spell is less reliable but longer lasting CC than EQ. It's an excellent zone control tool. Hui's EE damages and pulls enemies towards the center of a targeted X-shaped area. Enemies hit are dealt a decaying slow. EE is the weakest CC option, but the best damage option because it's AoE and very fast. It's great at proccing multiple passives in a teamfight, it's good wave clear, and it forces short trades on lightly protected targets. Hui's R is a linear skill shot that creates an aura around the first champion hit. The aura expands over 3 seconds, dealing magic damage and applying a ramping slow to all enemies within. When either the duration ends or the primary target dies, the aura explodes for more damage, instantly ending its slow on all targets. So, to recap, QQ is your core damage, QW is a conditional finisher, QE is your zone control, AoE damage, and wave clear, WQ repositions your team, WW protects you while standing your ground, WE is for mana sustain, EQ is your core CC, EW is conditional zone control CC, and EE is for AoE damage and combo setup. Your R is a nuke that makes it easier to hit your other spells. My first mistake was casting QW way too often, not realizing how conditional it was. Then I started casting QQ too often, not realizing how good QE is. Then I started casting QE too often, not realizing how much damage I was losing by fully neglecting QQ. Each spell is easy to understand in a vacuum, but since much of the skill of Hui comes from moment-to-moment decision-making, which is trained by intuition and experience, you cannot learn how to cast your Qs from only a guide. If you're trying to deal damage, you want to proc your passive in almost every trade, but if that's impossible, then QQ poke is useful. Your WQ can be used to pressure your opponent directly by getting you into range for trades, but doing so means you can't escape from ganks. The good part about W is that casting it never locks you out of a combo, so if WQ or WW would be valuable for their utility, you shouldn't worry too much about losing WE. Of course, a caster with so many spells has a lot of ways to combo them together. In every combo, if you can find a WE before your spells land, you'll deal more damage, and if you can find it after your spell is cast, your combo will be less telegraphed. If you can find an earlier R cast, your opponent will be chunked with less chance to retaliate, and it'll be easier to confirm the combo. But the core of Hui's combo game is how his Qs interact with his Es, so start learning there. Your basic trade in early lane is a QQWE, which holds E to protect yourself. Your bread and butter short trade at range is an EQQQ. The inverse is slower, but still useful off QQ poke. The full single target burst variant is EQWERQQ. If the enemy is already low and isolated, then QW can be stronger, but QQ is for the average case burst. If the enemy is protected by a shallow creep wave, EEQQ is your basic short trade. EE is harder to react to than EQ, but protects you less from retaliation. By level 13, an immobile enemy is vulnerable to EWQE, which can be expanded to a flash EWRWEQE. QEWE won't proc passive, but hurts a lot if the enemy accidentally touches a fissure. You might want to try QWEE for an AoE execute, but the timing doesn't seem to work. You can't land QW during the displacement. This means that Hui will only land an AoE QW execute with CC support from his allies. Of course, you can also EQ flash, QQ flash, and R flash. This is not a complete list of all possible Hui combos, especially since most of these do have a conditional QW version, but this should be a strong foundation. Be careful though, since Hui takes such precise keystrokes, getting CC'd is a big problem for him. The Hui player may have to cancel out of a menu to reorient themselves. And watch out for EE, which at the time of recording is a walk into range ability. Trying to land EEQQ from out of range will result in an EQ and Hui getting stuck in his Q menu. If Hui is on curve, he has a mostly backloaded wave clear pattern. You don't want to cast QQ without priming the wave with autos, not in early lane phase because the cooldown is too long to easily confirm the CS without spending another long cooldown, opening you up to trades, and not in middle lane phase because it deals too much damage to create an efficient 2-rotation QQ-QE-WE wave clear pattern. You're generally casting QEWE after auto attack setup when wave clear is your main goal. If Hui is far ahead of curve, he gets very non-interactive with the one combo QEWE-EE clear. Of course, these are baseline patterns. QQ does have a place on cannon waves, and specific timing and number of attacks will vary. You're going to notice a pattern of Hui being very complex on a micro level, but very simple at a macro level, and that starts with his skill order. Don't get overwhelmed by the wall of text. We're maxing Q first because we urgently need a lower cooldown to unlock meaningful teamfight damage. Then we max E second, again for damage and uptime, but also because most of our E spells gain greater CC duration with ranks. We max W last because the cooldown cannot get low enough to justify over E second, because WE's damage per rank is equal to E's, not greater, and especially because the investment into our shield can't be meaningfully felt by our allies. But we do take W at level 2 to gain access to mana for laning, otherwise 4 to 5 Qs will exhaust our mana bar. Hwei will always have mana issues if he's not casting WE or getting blue buffs. This is not a champion who makes different decisions at each level or in each game in terms of skill points. Hwei is a mid-range jack-of-all-trades burst mage who provides his teammates with copious options for taking and controlling space, slowly creating his windows for nukes. On every spell rotation, Hwei has to decide whether he's playing for utility and zone control, whether he's holding cooldowns or not, whether he's trying to dump AoE damage to set up a primary carry for cleanup, or whether he's meant to 100 to 0 a single enemy squishy. His deep toolkit makes him very flexible in fights, assuming he can trust his team to work together. But with no access to the entire kit at once, Hwei must always choose the right approach to each fight, constantly towing the line between too selfish and too selfless. On his macro level approach to the game, Hwei is a very typical scaling mage. He has long early cooldowns, he's immobile, he's fragile, and so he likes to farm above all, fighting only around his spikes. Generally, he's not rotating without his ultimate and a major item. He really wants the game to be played at his slow pace, and his allies should be happy to support that given how much he gives back to them. Hwei is a frontliner's best friend. As implied by his purpose, he's amazing at taking and holding space, in part because he gets his playmaker into position at Mach 10 without sacrificing the ability to combo off their play. So note the utility-heavy ultimate with backloaded damage. Note the Lux tier survivability, and the frontline synergy, and the defensive coverage given to fellow backliners, and the scaling nature of the champion. Hwei is unquestionably a teamfight mage, so again, your entire game plan should be about generating the resources needed to be strong in teamfights. Dirtying the game exposes you to danger, and like many other immobile burst mages, falling behind the curve leaves you feeling like you're dealing no damage and opens you up to chain feeding. Your lane phase is weak enough, you don't need to make it harder. But in a solo queue environment, what if you can't trust your team? What if you're not playing in a cohesive teamfight comp with no frontline to stand behind and no incentive to cast your utility? In that case, you're still farming and playing for your spikes as usual, but your game plan is a lot more pick-centric. Your EQ becomes your favorite tool alongside ambush tactics to find stray squishies. As long as you strike first and defend yourself while waiting for your R to resolve, you should find yourself very capable of punishing mistakes and driving the game forwards. It's typical solo queue mage behavior. Before we move into how we're drafting Hwei, it's worth bringing up some possible alternative roles. With so much utility in his arsenal, Hwei sounds like a compelling support, but he's got some severe laning issues. His long cooldowns and half-value shield on allies create an obligation to build some damage, but he can't get enough for his burst patterns. If playing exclusively around QE in teamfights sounds like your style, I'm sure Hwei support works, but neither the early game nor the income are there to make him thrive. Hwei bot lane tested inconclusively. He loves XP and his weak laning and frailty are an issue against marksmen, but we've seen him bully hyper carries and level 13 might be good enough. Hwei top lane will chain feed, just imagine putting a Lux up there and you can see the issue. And Hwei jungle just doesn't have the cooldowns necessary for a mage to clear. So even though there might be some fringe viability towards the bottom lane to explore, we're only addressing Hwei mid for the rest of this video. Entering the draft phase, it's established that drafting Hwei indicates that we're building a teamfight composition, ideally front to back, but flank and even dive comps as artillery support look fine as well. In the worst case scenario, an early Hwei pick can get us into some control comps, especially 1-4, plausibly Siege as defensive coverage and QW spam, and possibly 1-3-1 if we can guarantee he's ahead enough for non-interactive wave clear. I would prefer Hwei to be in a 3-threat composition so he's less punished for accessing his utility in a teamfight, optimally with a bruiser jungler. But to pick Hwei in the first place, we need some understanding of his matchup spread. As usual, this will take time to develop, but so far, I've been pretending that he has Lux's general spread, and it seems to be working out. He's quite strong in the average mage versus mage lane because his laning damage is genuinely good, he's just limited by cooldowns. But add any physical skirmisher or assassin, and this gets very difficult. Unlike Lux, Hwei's reactive CC is stronger than a root, so he does have an extra safety net, but mage killer champions still seem to be very happy into Hwei. Based on our limited information, it would appear that Hwei is a poor blind pick unless the meta overwhelmingly favors mages. Hui is one of those champions releasing immediately before a major itemization rework, so I won't waste your time pretending to be an expert. Just know that there is nothing unusual about Hui's itemization. He likes mana, AP, and magic penetration, and appears to be perfectly standard, so whatever you see Orianna and Syndra building, Hui will also build. On live, that means he likes Ludens for raw burst and Liandry's for slow play. Under the new season, he probably likes The Gun, followed by either Storm Surge or Shadow Flame against squishier and tankier teams respectively. We will watch how mages as a whole develop to know what Hui is doing for itemization. For runes, Hui defaults to Arcane Comet to ensure he has some laning presence. He has multiple Comet confirms in his kit. You're supporting this with typical mage minor runes, Scorch enforced combat lanes, Gathering Storm whenever you have a scaling handshake. I love Inspiration runes to support the tree, taking Cosmic Insight, Magical Footwear, Futures Market when their conditions are met. I've even warmed up to cookies lately. Hui can use the laning help in his hardest matchups. Do consider the new Triple Tonic rune. It accelerates Hui's scaling and empowers his level 6 all-in. As usual, First Strike is a strong option, but you have to be sure you're in a safe scaling lane before you opt into it. Electrocute over-optimizes for one trade pattern and puts you into a weaker tree, and Airy isn't consistently procced more often than Comet given Hui's positioning. Again, there's nothing unusual by mage standards in this system. So that's Hui the Visionary. This champion is so satisfying to play and so much fun to master. A wrong decision makes you completely useless in a fight, but a correct decision makes you feel so confident in your ability to read the game state. I just love champions with this much depth, and I cannot wait for him to join the roster. Now, since there is so much depth, we're definitely going to have to learn more post-release, so if you're willing to help others grow, please share anything you learn about Hui in the comments below. If you would like to support me on Patreon, I would appreciate that greatly as I've fallen on some tough times lately. Thank you so much to my patrons, SonicX5040, Mel7401, Hailfire, and Darwin. Your support makes these videos possible.